thank you so much, everyone, for joining in to this webinar for Stop Overcomplicating Your Battery Sales. Really looking forward to the conversation we're going to have all around batteries, tariffs, market conditions, and of course, how to really build value as a solar installer, talking with your homeowners, or even a solar installer as a whole in that battery conversation. So got a great panel of guests today. I am joined by Dean Chiaravallotti, CRO here at Solar Insure, Jordan Pacheco, the Vendor Relationships Manager at BayWa, and Brian London, Vice President of Energy Services at Fortress Power. So guys, I appreciate you all joining in today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Yes. So as I had said just previously, we are going to discuss everything and anything and hopefully give everybody watching some really great actionable insights into the storage market, how you can discuss this with homeowners and position yourself, your company, and your product to be that value and use that as your differentiator between you and your competition. So we're going to dive right into conversation here, but I want to open it up by just throwing it out to the guys. If you don't know who these people are, they're fantastic. So Jordan, why don't we start with you? Just can you give everybody an introduction to yourself, how long you've been at BayWa, and what you do there?
Sure. My name is Jordan Pacheco. I'm actually the director of vendor programs at BayWa. Recently moved over. So I'm working with the product team, working to curate quality product options for our customers. I've been with the company for about 4 years now. Been in the industry for about 15.
Amazing. Awesome. So you've seen it really flow and change over the last 15 years because it has moved a lot.
It's been a ride for sure.
It's awesome. Brian, would love to hear from you.
Hi, everyone. Brian London. I'm Vice President of Energy Services at Fortress Power. I've been at Fortress for over 3 years. And basically, my role is to develop solutions and partnerships and incentive programs to help partners and homeowners and business owners get more value from their batteries.
Amazing. Love it. Very helpful. We're going to be looking forward to your insight today. And of course, last but not least, Dean.
Hey, Dean Chiaravallotti here with Solar Insure, Chief Revenue Officer, and here to help homeowners make it go safe to go solar and get batteries. So been in the industry since about 2010 in and around it, and love to be here with everyone today.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dean. So for everybody watching, go ahead and if you have questions, throw them into the chat. We will hopefully save some time towards the end to go through and answer as many of them as we possibly can. But if something really does stand out as well, I can throw it into the conversation. So go ahead and just leave that. But guys, let's dive right in to what the people want to hear. So first question that I want to talk about is just setting the landscape for the storage market. Why do you think the storage market has become such a hot topic in the industry, not even this year, but over the last few years in residential space? And what do you think the major drivers are behind that increased consumer interest right now?
I can start. There's a lot, and I'm probably only be able to touch on a few because there's so many drivers. But really, it used to be a luxury, but what's brought it into the forefront are net metering changes, natural disasters. We've seen, weather events, incentives from the government, and also from the utilities, and then virtual power plant programs. So really, we're seeing a lot of interest in resiliency and being able to have power whenever we want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think it's the net metering changes, the need for resiliency. And also there's been a big change where people are also getting fed up with some of their utilities and are starting to look to actually just consume their own energy. They're not looking to move completely off grid. They just really want to use their own energy. And that's really a key driver for what they're looking to get out of it. So it's not just financial. It's not just the need for resiliency. It's also that goal to just be self-sufficient that's driving people to get batteries.
And I think you're also looking at the cost of the technology has slowly started to come down from where it started from. And also with looking at the technology again, it's just come so far that now several use cases can be addressed with each of these systems. So it's just really whatever the homeowner is trying to solve for.
Yeah.
You make a great point there too, Jordan. The technology, like we've all been involved in solar for a long time. So we've seen the evolution and find ourselves in a very developed solar market, but we maybe sometimes get a little bit lost in the fact that batteries are still in that early part of their life cycle. And especially to touch on some for you there, Brian, the virtual power plants, right? That's a huge driver for new interest and new ways for people to adopt rather than just buying things, right?
Yeah, when I started doing this in really beginning of 2017, virtual power plants were really demand response programs, thermostats, and other kinds of things. We were just looking to shed load. Batteries were seen as being a solution there, but they were just too expensive at the time. Now, they're, as Jordan was saying, they've become really cost effective, and now a lot of retailers and utilities and others are starting to figure out ways to use them and actually get so much value from the use of these batteries that actually they become very cost effective, or actually help people who buy them actually make a decent return on investment from acquiring these, because these batteries can be used on a regular basis, not just for backup.
I think you've also had some pretty powerful brands walk into the market as well. So that's a way to resonate with the end user when they see a brand that they recognize and see high value in.
Mm-hmm. Jordan, how has that changed for you guys at BayWa? I mean, even 2 or 3 years ago, there was maybe 2 brands.
Right.
Is that coming from you guys, just there's more powerful players there that you're able to recommend, or are you seeing installers coming to you guys saying, hey, we've heard about this great new technology, like Fortress, for example, and we want to work with them? Like, what does that look like from distribution?
I mean, it really depends on the market that source comes from, particularly if they're working, with a TPO. But we've seen recommendations come in from installers, but for the most part, we feel pretty strong with our vendors, as they've created some pretty robust training programs and have really made ways to resonate with both the end user and the installer to try to deliver on those value props.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, training is so vitally important. We all know in this, right? Like, you need to know how everything is working before you can sell something properly and create value to bring it all back into the webinar. Right? So would love to hear from you guys too, your thoughts on, we know where batteries are at today. What emerging trends do you think you see? And Dean, this may be a really good thing. I know you work with a lot of providers across the country. Like, what trends are solar installers facing that could shape the way that the battery market goes in the next, 6 months, a year, 2 years? Like, what is coming immediately?
Yeah, I think the top 2 things that are on people's minds are the tariffs, right? That could shape the next 12 to 18 months. VPP programs. We recently had a program in Rocky Mountain Power that decreased the rebate, right? And we have others giving rebates, right? And then the ITC, like, is the ITC gonna be here? So that's kind of on the chopping block right now. So that's another concern that might shape the future, the very near future of batteries.
Yeah, I think that's a great list. I think we're definitely seeing that, especially over everything over the last months with tariffs, and and also in the next coming months with the impact of tariffs. I think what we're going to see is, as a result of that, all companies having to start creating more or having more manufacturing in the U.S. And that's what Fortress has planned, and we will have that in Q4 or by Q4. But and some of these programs, Dean, you mentioned WattSmart being now capped. WattSmart with Rocky Mountain Power now capped at $2,000. But in other parts of the country, it's actually going in the opposite way, where actually the incentives are getting bigger. Pilot programs are evolving into full-fledged programs, or existing programs are seeing that they can actually use the batteries a lot more and therefore provide a lot more value to battery owners. And the impact of that is these systems that they put in, thinking they're going to get a return of, a longer return, say 7 to 10 years, Now they're looking to get that closer to 5 years because these are being used so much more often. And we're seeing that just across the country. A couple of years ago, it was okay, there were only a couple different real VPP programs. Now they're popping up, and it's going to be most of the country will have the ability to access a VPP program in the next year. And that's really incredible that there's such a change, a fast change.
Seriously, no kidding. So Jordan, I wanted to touch with you as well. I know we mentioned the tariffs, the change, from a distribution standpoint, and Brian, you may be able to talk about this as well from manufacturing. Like, how do we prepare for that? And it's like you have people who are looking ahead, planning for the future, like Fortress, who are bringing in that U.S. manufacturing. But like, what does that go into with an installer? For how do you have that conversation with either the installers or even downstream further to the homeowners?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question, and really that's been a focus of ours. We're seeing obviously the effects of the tariffs, and it's always paramount to bring in forecasts and understand what your possible demand could be. It's even more so in a scenario like this. Forecasts are king. It helps us understand what we can get, how much we can get, from who we can get. And now with the additional levy within the tariffs, like at which price we can get it. And so there's actually an opportunity here for folks to really stabilize their business and stabilize their supply chains for the foreseeable. If we can all act fast and act together. I mean, from the manufacturer side, I know from Fortress's point of view, they want to know as much as possible ahead of time, and so do we. So forecast. That must be the way.
Did you mention anything about how contractors can do this with the homeowner, Ryan? Did you want to touch on that?
Yeah. How does that look? Dean, you may have a really great insight into some of the contractors you're working with. Like, how are they having these conversations? Because it is so tariffs yes, tariff no, like where we live.
Yeah, so like I've talked with many that they didn't have a force majeure clause in their contract, and they don't want to have to go back and cancel the contract and make a new contract and raise the price. So they're losing some money right now. But to keep that sale, but they're updating their contracts, being more transparent with the homeowners that, hey, we're in a kind of a flux right now, and it's still a great value to have a battery, to have this, and to be able to move forward. Batteries, early battery adopters, pay more than this, right? And so it's still a great value to be able to move forward. And the sooner they have that battery in place, they're shielded from any other moving parts, because net metering changes, other things are happening all across the country, and so it's imperative for them to. But really, it's transparency, like letting them know upfront in their contracts. Make sure that they're aware of like the landscape that we're in, and to plan, right? Plan with your suppliers, just like was said. We've got to make sure that you look at it and don't wing it. Make sure that you plan.
Totally. Do you guys? I'm curious, because I see the tumultuousness of the market that we're in. Having these conversations, and like Dean said, being really transparent. Do you see a potential for like a solar installer to actually use this as an opportunity to really build trust and relationship with their customers?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think this is a scenario when you're looking into a lot of uncertainty. Prices could go here, prices could go there. If you're looking at a huge delta in cost going the wrong way for your customer, you're likely to lose some of those sales. And so being able to clearly communicate what's going on, why it's happening, and what you think the options are, and laying out here are the possible outcomes of what we're looking at with this particular situation. If the tariffs hit, or if the extension is basically concluded, like this is what we're going to look at. So it would be best to procure at this time, or switch to maybe a different manufacturer or vendor, somebody with a more secure supply chain. I mean, there are a ton of options, but none if you don't plan for them.
Yeah, and we're seeing that often with a number of different partners where they're having better conversations and they're really taking advantage of the fact that they are established installers in a region and are not some fly-by-night installer coming in just trying to get as many sales as they can in through a region and then move on. They're part of the community, so we're here, look, this is what we're trying to do, this is what is going on, here are your options, and this is what we think you need, here's our recommendation, but let's keep things flexible so that we're checking in through the process. We've seen installations get pushed back, we've seen installations get pushed up. It's just, there's no rule of thumb. It's just all been people trying to do the best thing and have a honest relationship and honest conversation with, from the homeowner all the way back to the manufacturer, and even for us with our supply chain as well. Everyone is having to try to get more aligned and say, look, this is what we can do. We're all trying to row in the same direction, and we're all facing the same challenges.
Yeah, that honesty is just so important, and it segues in really nicely to kind of the next part of our conversation, which is creating that value. Of course, we know the right thing to do is, as we've just talked about, right, have those open and honest conversations and transparency, and using this as a good opportunity for yourself. But in terms of creating value for storage sales and working with storage as a whole, what are some of the most common ways that you guys are seeing companies overcomplicate these battery sales? Like what are people doing wrong that is just pushing off the sale for them?
I think a part of it sort of starts out with not necessarily understanding the issue that the customer is trying to solve with their energy storage system. Some folks are in it for the resilience, some for arbitrage, some just think it's cool. And I think it's really important to kind of understand who you're talking to and what they're about. And I mean, I feel like that goes without saying in any type of sale, but specifically this one, because the storage sale, if you walk in only pitching the PV, that's a huge price difference. And it can feel like a really high-end add-on for a sale. So you need to be able to kind of visualize it in a way that creates value with that homeowner.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of misconceptions out there, right? Like, hey, I get a battery, I have my whole home's backed up. Even in the early days of solar, everyone thought, if I have solar, I got power when the grid is down, and it definitely wasn't true. So being able to ask questions and listen and really find out what their needs are is super important. Building that trust, building value in what you deliver. Ask the questions and listen. Listen more than you talk.
Yeah, we're seeing that with some of our closer partners that we've had better relationships with. They're going in and they're exactly like what Dean said, or they're trying to understand, okay, what are you actually trying to do? What are the use cases for the system that you're trying to achieve? Is it that you have a true need for resiliency like a customer in Puerto Rico, or is it a nice to have? And then what are they trying to back up? How do they want to use it? How much energy do they need? How much power do they need? And really making it easy to do that. And what we found is customers who we've worked with, by customers, I mean installers that we work with that can go through and have a technique to sit down with a homeowner and say, okay, let's go through what you want to do. And there's a kind of a sheet format for them to have that conversation. They can go through with that and say, oh, okay, based on this is what I'm recommending, and here's why. And because of that, again, going back to that honesty and transparency, now you've seen, look, I didn't tell you what you need. You told me what you need, and I'm just regurgitating it back to you. And I'm through this format. And now the customer is like, oh, I see why you're saying I need X, and this is the value I'm going to get. That just seems to work really well, as opposed to someone going in and saying, okay, I sold you X amount of solar. We recommend you getting this battery, and this is how cheap I can get it to you.
Yeah. And each homeowner is like a fingerprint. They're all different, and we need to really get to know who they are, what their needs and wants are, and really their household and their house, right? And everything that in between, right? And making sure that we give them something custom for them.
Yeah,
totally.
And also meeting them at their level. You don't want to overcomplicate or get too highly technical for someone that may not be following where you're at in terms of your knowledge. So best to kind of equate to where they're at, basically explaining how the system will affect their overall energy usage. How does this accomplish the goal that you're trying to achieve, basically?
Yeah, I like that. It's telling them the story of like, this is what it's going to do at the end of this. This is what it will do. Is that what you are looking for? And really, creating that story of like, yeah, like I really that's what I want. That's what I need. And really being able to make sure that they deliver on the value of that as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. I like what you said there too, Jordan, of like getting on their level. Like that is so important. Anybody who's worked in solar knows sometimes you have the person who knows nothing about anything you're talking about. And sometimes you have the engineer that is going to dive deep into your data sheets and ask you about the, voltage differences, right? So, what is the rule of thumb then for getting on a person's level and simplifying the pitch? And similarly though, should you even be looking to simplify the pitch, or does it depend on the customer?
I think that's with your conversation with the customer. If you're listening, they're telling you exactly what they need and what level they're at. As long as you're having that sort of conversation and not a regurgitated pitch that works, 40% of the time or whatever that number may be, this is not something that you can just sell at volume like that. This is a custom made system, one for every homeowner out there. Everyone's going to be a little different with their use cases. And so it's up to you to kind of sit there and listen and understand what exactly they're asking of you.
Yeah, actually, so that's kind of where Fortress really shines. That's really kind of the segment that we focus on, because there are others that seem to be like, we are, they're mass market. They are the rubber stamp. They're there for 40 to 60% of the market. We're more of, okay, you want this is your specific ways of using it. You want to add a generator as well as solar and have that all integrated in your energy storage system. Oh, you want to do this odd thing or this other thing, or you want to combine all these different use cases. Really, that's where Fortress shines. So we tend to work closer with installers that try to have that conversation, have that open dialogue, really understand what the customer, the homeowner is looking to do, or their business owner is looking to do, and then use our systems in a kind of really bespoke way to really meet their specific needs.
That's great. So it seems like especially what I'm hearing from you guys too, is that the complications that a lot of sales reps are putting into their battery sales is the fact that you're trying so many times to fit square pegs into round holes. Like, and you have to find the right proper fit for everybody. Is that right?
Yeah, finding the fit is very important. And if, and that might be sometimes saying no. This home doesn't qualify, this situation doesn't qualify, or say, hey, give them advice, right? But if somebody really wants something, that's up to that person, that individual. But really, it's about making sure that they get what they need, and assessing that is by those questions, right? And then giving them everything that they need, like at least at a base level of what they need to understand what's happening. And for not only for compliance, but also for educating them and helping them understand what's going to be happening. And really is talking about like, this is how it's going to work. You're going to get some technology to be able to see it. We're going to program it based on what we talked about. And this is what's going to help you with your needs. So really having that full education, even like what you're going to see after, and how this is going to work is really imperative.
Yeah, well said, Dean. Well said. Brian, I've got a great question for you that I'd love your perspective from the manufacturer standpoint. Obviously, we've mentioned that batteries can be a little bit confusing. People get caught up on a number of different things where or too focused on something, the wrong stuff. Curious if you have any just anecdotal, like what are the main use cases that most people are going at? Like, is the majority of customers you guys work with is all emergency backup? Is it the rate arbitrage, or does it depend on the market a little bit?
Completely depends on the market. Every state is different. Even within states, they're different. Even within a specific utility territory within a state, there are different people who want to use it in a different way. What I've seen is people really are confused by batteries. It seems like a really complicated thing. So what we like to do is just think about it, break it down. So think about it as a reservoir of water. And so you've got the total amount of water that you're fitting into this reservoir that you may need to use. And then you've got the size of the hose that you're using. And let's figure out how you want to use this reservoir of water. You can use it to water your lawn. You can use it for showering. You can use it for drinking. We'll figure it out how you want to combine these things and what you want to do at different times of the year. And we'll figure out how much you need for both the total amount of water you're going to be holding and how big of a nozzle you need to have as well. And with that, that becomes all of a sudden really easy. And that complicated, scary thing now becomes something that they can laugh at and say, oh yeah, this is no big deal.
I love that analogy. It's such a simplistic but like perfect way that you can really relate it. And it's something that anybody watching, it's a great takeaway. Write that one down, your water reservoir. It's fantastic.
Yes, thank you. That was great.
Yeah, that's the best one I've heard.
There we go. We all learned something new today. So another question then that I have for you guys, obviously we talked about tariffs and prices kind of going all over the place. How do you convince the homeowner why now, as opposed to the person who may say, I'll wait for the prices to drop or maybe the technology to change? What does the conversation for that look like?
Yeah, I think that was a part of the conversation that we had prior to starting the webinar, where you're looking at net metering trends across the country. If you're not already in a utility that you must have a storage system, you soon will be. And so just looking in on your rates, just like in California, for instance, over the past 10 years, rates have risen about 100% on average. So that trend it doesn't feel like that's going to go away anytime soon. And when you're looking at the transitioning out of certain net metering, programs, if you're in a one-to-one state, chances are, that's also in another hourglass that's already been tipped over. So it's probably best to get in front of it. But if you're also looking at the ROIs, I would put money that the ROI of one of these systems is certainly going to outweigh your overall, I can't spend it now, in terms of how much the project is going to cost. Granted, some folks may say like, okay, that's a lot for me to shell out all at once. But if you were to look at the overall life of the system, it would certainly pay for itself in that time.
Absolutely.
I don't think there's a perfect answer to that question, because it depends. I had a good friend who was really trying to time it perfectly for as net metering is going away, because he still wanted to capture one for one net metering, but also wait for the cost to come down. And it's almost impossible to get that. So really, you're looking to say, okay, what is it you need? What are your costs? And what do you expect them how do you expect them to change going forward? But also, what's your needs today? And what is your personal financial situation today? We had one of our great partners in Texas. He actually agreed with a homeowner at the very last minute. Days before they were going to start working on their system, which is really unheard of for a lot of installers. He allowed the customer to say, you know what, this isn't the right time because of their personal financial situation, and they were no longer in a position to have this large cash outlay or even take out a loan. So I think it depends for everyone. Things are always in flux, and some of these installers that are willing to say, yes, this is not the right time for you. They're probably going to get that benefit later down the road when that that person makes a great recommendation to someone else, and they get a lot more business because they passed on one project. But other people, it's just they're going to see their utility rates go up or net metering changes, and it's better to get in and start saving money now. So it always changes.
Yeah, and I always like to ask, hey, what happens if you don't solve this? And it opens up the dialogue, right, and helps them. You're more of a consultant than a pushy salesperson, and really you get their perspective and help them to make the decision that if this is the best time for them to go with a battery or not.
And Dean, I love that approach too. The like, what happens if you don't solve this? Because it does really change the conversation from a sales rep to being like, you need this because of I'm going to check all these boxes, to like, let's talk about what that sunk cost is. What does your life look like without this technology on it? So what I'm interested to hear too is, we're talking about looking at that sunk cost and planning for the future. How do incentives factor into this? And we mentioned earlier, potentially the ITC being on the chopping block, especially Brian, from your guys' side, from manufacturing, and like, what kind of plans are going into how the business changes in an ITC-less world if that were to happen?
Well, that'll definitely it'll definitely hurt if all of a sudden the ITC goes away. Well, I don't think it will, and that's definitely something that we were paying close attention to. I think all the OEMs in the market were paying close attention to that, as well as others in the market. So really, there's a lot of support for it. So I don't actually see the ITC going away, but yes, that is definitely something that would really make things much more difficult for a number of people, as it just may not pencil for them anymore. And that's a key piece of making sure, as we're in this phase of the adoption of energy storage, we're seeing a larger number of people being driven by the financial value, and it will be much harder to make it work without that 30%.
Yeah, totally. That is a big part. I look a lot, I kind of related a bunch to net metering, though, in terms of the similar conversation. There is obviously impact when metering went away, especially in California, moving from NEM 1 to NEM 2 and then to NEM 3. But history has shown us that the market does continue, right? Mm-hmm. So obviously it will hurt quite a bit, but is it possible that we keep pushing forward, and maybe is it local incentives? Is it something else? Like, what maybe comes in its place?
Well, you have to look at what the value is from getting this. So net metering changed. It changed because there have been different amounts of solar on that, and that helped or hurt based on how much solar was out there. The reason why California had to go to the net billing tariff, or NEM 3.0 from NEM 2, is because actually there was too much solar in the middle of the day, and they had to shift that. And the amount of how quickly they had to ramp up, and the traditional generation around dinner time had gotten to be a major problem. And you can think about it almost like driving your car on the highway, where it's stable and everything is efficient, versus having to, you're really stepping on that accelerator, trying to accelerate as quickly as possible, really inefficient. So California was in this position where there was way too much solar in the middle of the day, and having to push that into places like Nevada, basically just actually like truly put the energy into the ground. And then all of a sudden have to rapidly ramp up generation really inefficiently, where it actually was less efficient than it was before solar. That was causing problems. So they had to make a change, because actually everything that they were doing with having that extra was actually working against the goal they were trying to achieve. So by changing the rules, and making time of use in a situation where people were putting in batteries so that they could store and use the energy later, and they were financially incentivized to do that, is actually moving to achieve the goals that California had the whole time. And so when we see these changes, there's a reason for that most of the time. Right now, to go back to the ITC,
we're the only ones here.
This is the way that that we're helping finance across the board, finance the people to make this decision and get the technology that's going to help everyone. So I see that actually it's important to have, and hopefully it doesn't go away because it's really helping us solve the problem that all people are facing.
Yeah, I appreciate that explanation too. That really does paint a much different picture than probably most people have in their mind of the way the policy just works out.
Yeah, and there's a flip side of that coin too, right? Because if you're looking at who's going to shoulder all of that in terms of like the rate increases, it's going to be the folks that don't have storage, right? Like they're over here holding up that end of it. Net metering is currently paying out to the storage folks. And so who's going to pay those rate increases or at least feel more of the brunt? It's going to be those that don't have anything, that are just there like, okay, like I'm on a standard rate structure. I don't have any generation. I don't have, a bidirectional meter. I'm just here. And so those are the folks that are really going to get it when it sort of comes down to like trying to balance this out for the utilities. They'll just raise rates.
Yeah, and I appreciate both of those perspectives. And if there was an ITC-less world, I would see what we're doing right now. We're planning, we're building, we're building factories in the state side, right? And we're figuring out ways to be able to get through that, because let's face it, we all need energy. We need to have this is an essential. It's like oxygen in space. We've got to have this available. And for some people, it is literally life-saving, and they've got to have it. So really, there'll be a reset, right? I'm sure there'll be some sort of a market reset, but we would continue on.
Totally. Totally. I love the analogy too, Dean. I know we've spoken about that before, the oxygen in space. It is so apropos for the storage conversation. It's becoming more and more across the country, right? And you're seeing it. I know myself in Illinois, we were a 1-for-1 metering market until just this year. So now that is changing. In some of those markets then, who are maybe more of those legacy, a little bit, the older markets that are slowly starting to turn, consumer sentiment doesn't flip overnight. So how do solar sales reps, solar companies go about reframing now that conversation from a battery being a luxury add-on to a necessity to their oxygen? Like, what is the best messaging for that? Dean, why don't you go ahead if you have any?
Oh yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah. So as far as that is, it's more like, what would you do during a blackout? What is your plan if there is a brownout or a blackout? And if they don't have a plan, then that starts the conversation right there that, hey, maybe you should have something in place to be able to get started on that. And really, we're seeing more and more people like needing medical devices, right? Also, we see these, deep freeze that happens in Texas. We have hurricanes that hit the East Coast and the Southeast, and we've got fires and wind events in California and other places. We saw that happen, unfortunately, in Maui as well. And so this is really, and these net metering changes that keep happening, it's definitely not a luxury item anymore. It's becoming a necessity.
Mm-hmm. Brian, I'm sure you guys deal with this a lot, especially in your messaging of people looking at batteries in some markets, and like, it's quite a bit. Like, what's the way you guys are working to reframe that thought process?
A lot of it is really the financial value. So if someone comes in and says, okay, I'd like to get solar, and you say, okay, well, actually, let's talk about what you're really trying to achieve. What they would actually can explain to help them understand is that solar alone will not actually allow them to achieve their goals, and that there's a certain payback with that. But then if they add on an energy storage system, then actually they're going to be able to achieve their goals. And it could be purely financial. I'm just saying, you know what, I'm sick and tired of writing a $200 bill every month for my electricity. That is just a crazy amount of money. I want to get solar. Okay, well, actually, solar will only do this. But if you add energy storage, this is what it's going to be. Here's what your return will be. And by the way, you also get resiliency against those storms, those events that Dean was saying. So it's really about, again, going back to that. Instead of saying, no, I know the answer for you, it's this is what you need. It's listening, saying, this is what you want to achieve. Okay, I understand. Tell me more, and then helping them land at that solution themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's such a great answer. And I think another thing to sort of consider is that having a home energy storage ready is also a viable option as well. So you have a lot of these inverters that are a part of the energy storage system where, you know, if you are installing PV and maybe, you know, the timing's not right, or, you know, they're waiting for certain rate structures to change or whatever it is, like there's many options out there where you can get that home ready for storage.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's, I know I used to do it in a lot of times in like an Illinois market, one that's not really heavily battery developed at that point. Then that's such a perfect way for people to kind of dip your toe in the water almost of like, we're going to get you ready for this because whether you like it or not, this is going to be something you're going to need. Like it's not just a preparedness type of thing. Like this will affect you. So, you know, maybe you can't buy into it right now, but we can do everything we can on the front end.
Yeah,
definitely.
Okay. Absolutely. How much then in terms of working with homeowners, like do you guys try and pull data from other markets, like especially when it comes to weather events? Do people believe that if you say like, hey, look at Texas had this deep freeze or all these severity of hurricanes that are continuing to hit the entire East Coast? Like, does that apply to other markets? Do people buy into that data, or do you have to more make it local?
I think you do have to make it local because again, that kind of like feeds into what resonates with that, you know, particular customer. If grid instability is an issue, then you know you're probably going to be having a resilience conversation as opposed to an arbitrage conversation. So I do believe that you really need to localize and really customize this as much as possible. As Brian said earlier, I mean, there are subsections of subsections within each utility. And if you're trying to just turn everything into nails because you have a hammer, then you know you're not going to have the success rate that you would like.
Yeah.
Another great analogy there. Yeah, I know Brian, you had mentioned to us before the webinar started that you know you guys have a huge presence in Puerto Rico. So the thought that I'd had there too was like, are you guys able to say, look what's happening in Puerto Rico and apply that to other places?
That's Puerto Rico is a special place, but unfortunately they have some legacy challenges with their infrastructure, their grid infrastructure, so that really everyone needs resiliency. It's not enough. You can't. I think the attachment rate is over 99%. I mean, almost no one is buying solar without putting in a battery system there because they need the resiliency. So after that, it's okay, this is what you need. Then the question is, how much do you need and how much can you afford? And what can we do to make you be able to afford the resiliency that you need? And then it's okay, how do we achieve that? So we're really proud that we were one of the first battery systems approved for the VPP there so that we could get incentives and help people be able to afford more energy capacity and get the resiliency that they need. But there it's a completely different market. I don't think anyone in the mainland US will think, no, I can have my power go out at any time and I have no idea how long it's going to take to get it back. And it wasn't even because of a storm. So it's a very different environment, but everyone, as Jordan was saying, everyone has to look at what they've seen, kind of what's going on around them, and then their specific needs and challenges.
Said. I know, Dean, you work a lot with Hawaiian market as well. What kind of insights, another 100% storage market there, what kind of insights are providers in Hawaii utilizing when it comes to battery storage?
Yes, as far as what's happening there is the Hawaiian people, they believe in solar. Some of them have 3 systems already and they're getting their 4th one. Or they have some batteries and they're just upgrading their whole system. And they know they need to have it. And also the utility doesn't allow any export on new installations. So really what that means is when they're looking to do this, they're looking at this is to fill up as much water as they can right into their reservoir to be able to feed right off of that for their usage, right? So basically that's what it is, and also program it in a way that where if there is a hurricane or some natural disaster that they might be able to have enough to be able to get through some weather some event.
Yeah, definitely something to look toward for the rest of the country as potentially things as we know solar trends start in Hawaii and then make their way to California, the East Coast, and the Midwest. So it's coming. So I appreciate those insights for everybody. As we are approaching kind of the end of our webinar time here, I just have a couple last questions for you guys, especially to leave our audience with something great. So first off, and Jordan, we can start with you on this one.
Sure.
What is you think, if you had to pinpoint, what's the biggest missed opportunity that solar installers have today in their battery storage conversations?
Biggest missed opportunity, I would say, just again, I feel like we're going back to this quite often, but it's really just establishing the use case that you're trying to solve for. And I think we're highlighting this so much because this really determines your approach, the value proposition, how you're showing your results to the customer in a way that resonates with them enough to make an informed decision and feel good about it, right? That's the other part. It's one thing to make the sale and the installation happens and your customer's not really happy with the product that they purchased from you. And it's not necessarily anyone's fault. It's just, this is just the resolution of what happened. So I think really honing in on what your customer is trying to achieve. And then, they know what they're trying to do and you have all the tools to make it happen. So it's really about selecting the right one at your disposal and explaining it in a way that resonates with them and they feel good about it.
That's fantastic. Brian, any big missed opportunities that you see out there?
No, I think that's a great answer. I think my view of missed opportunities is more specific within where there are incentives. So there are parts of the country where there are great incentives and installers are not taking advantage of those. And by taking advantage, I mean not bringing that into a homeowner and sitting down with them and saying, look, this program is here. It will help you cover this much of the system. This is what they expect in return. And this is why it still makes sense for you to do that. And so there are a number of these programs across the country that are really valuable, and most installers are not taking advantage of it. And a large part of what I try to do is help educate them and say, look, this is why this is the right solution. This is the right program for your customers and what they need to know and what you need to know. And this is why everyone can benefit. But on the flip side, there are also utilities and other market participants that are not providing these programs, and they're missing an opportunity to really help provide a service to the ratepayers in their region and say, look, if you get this, instead of getting a solar system and making it more expensive for all the other ratepayers in your area, get a solar system and a battery and use them in conjunction with what the utility is already doing. And for that, everyone can win.
Yeah. I'll just say from my perspective is not being that energy service provider in their region, not going to work on systems that have the original contractors gone out of business, or going back to their existing customer base that has solar only, and really re-engaging or engaging with a new market, being the hero and being all things solar in their market, and not just being an installer, like really like being that energy service provider where you're going to help them make sure that their solar and battery has the most uptime in the lifespan of it, and giving them peace of mind and having a profitable service department. And really, the service on the back end is really important. It's not just about the installation.
Yeah, you make a great point there. We spent a lot of this conversation talking about that sale and the installation of it, but that's another piece that could do its own entire webinar at some point for, you know, that back end service and creating a great customer experience after the point, right? Jordan, do you guys see that a lot? What does the conversation look like a lot with installers when they're talking about service?
Yeah, so I think it's really about being able to go back to those customers, making sure that you're having your touch points, because, you know, as it was mentioned by Dean, there's a ton of opportunity, not only to revisit, but to also really try to diversify your revenue streams. And that could be retrofit, that could be O&M, that could be added on services. And it's not just about making another sale, it's about increasing your value to the homeowner and into your community. Most of the time, you know, we're talking about these mid-regional installers who've really spent, you know, 15, 20 years building their reputations in these communities. And so they're all about going back, reservicing, going to check in on a job they did back in, you know, 2012. And so these are all opportunities for them, not only to strengthen their foothold within the community, show their support, but also to bring in new revenue streams for them as well.
Totally. And I can imagine too that going back and having those regular touch points, along with, you know, ensuring that you're building trust with your customers, there are opportunities for add-ons, for additions, for when you maintain that trust, for recommendations, and that all helps to reduce your soft costs, right? Mm-hmm. The cheapest customer you're ever going to acquire is the referral or the same customer that you already had that, you know, trusts what you're doing and wants to do even more.
Yeah, people's needs change. You know, they did it for a certain case. Their family may have grown. They may have acquired an EV. Things are constantly changing. So I think Jordan hit the nail on the head there.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I want to thank you all so much for your time. This has been a great, super valuable conversation. I hope everybody watching today took a ton out of this. We want to leave a little bit of time here at the end just for Q&A, for any questions. So if you have anything, go ahead and throw them in the chat, and we can ask the guys and fellas while we're waiting for any questions potentially to come in. Any last thoughts from anybody? Last things that you want to leave our audience with?
I think for our side of the table, we want to stress on, you know, the planning, the forecasting side of things. As mentioned, you know, we're running into a tumultuous time with a bunch of tariffs and, you know, questions around storage supply. So forecasts are super important. Also, if you're not already looking to get into the storage side of things, as far as a service that you provide, now's a great time to start looking at it. Manufacturers and the distributors alike have robust training programs. There's always something going on. There's a training of some sort, and people are just happy to help. There are a lot of resources. You know, as Brian mentioned, we have folks that have aggregated who's got what incentives where. So, you know, you can figure out if you're missing anything in your market. And if not, just to kind of see what's going on. And if it's something that you should be a part of, especially if you're in a one-to-one state now, you could actually be at the forefront.
Totally. Dean, Brian, any last thoughts you want to leave the audience with?
Sure. The one last thought is, you know, I'm always looking for partners in the region. So if there's anyone who is looking to work with someone hand in hand to help grow their business, I'm happy to do that. That's what we enjoy doing. We're not looking for just be a manufacturer or supplier. We prefer to work much more closely with installers. So anyone is looking for that, please reach out to me.
Yeah. What's the best way that people can find you? And Dean, go ahead, and then we'll leave everybody an opportunity here to connect.
Well, I was just going to say that some other manufacturers aren't growing right now, so that says something about Fortress. So, and I also would like to say, hey, if you're struggling to have a profitable service department, or you are facing consumer skepticism due to the negative bankruptcies and the press that's on solar, or your salespeople are focused more on price than value, then talk with somebody at Solar Insure. We'd love to be able to see if we're a good fit. And if we're not, we'll refer you to someone that might be able to help.
Amazing. Guys, what's the best way for everyone to contact you? Brian, where do we reach out to get a handle on Fortress?
Can you share our email addresses with all
Absolutely.
attendees?
Yeah, we'll share that. I'll share out everybody's email addresses so you guys connect. Anybody attendees can connect on LinkedIn, connect with everybody, reach out to them. Great opportunities for partnerships here. Oh, well, everyone, thank you so much for joining. We don't have any questions coming through, so we will leave it there. If people watching, if you do have a question, feel free to email us, but we will send you everything following up. And then this webinar will also live live on the Solar Insure YouTube channel, so you can catch it there if you want to learn all of this again and hear it again. So Jordan, Brian, Dean, thank you so much for lending your expertise, and have a great rest of your day.